we're talking about, say, we're planning to replace the entire HVAC system or the entire, plumbing system. So they're just one particular system, but they can still be taken into consideration under the operation and maintenance. Okay. Individual tenant spaces would not apply over here because they're not really, it would be a very small part and they do not really have a, scope of applying for an operation and maintenance on their own. The next is commercial interior. It's very simple. So it goes into ID+C, which is interior design and construction. So this is for commercial interior, office and retail spaces, institutional spaces. So it usually works in hand with the core and shell type program, right? So core and shell deals with the outer layers, and ID+C would take care of the interiors. We then have homes, which are actually new residences, major remodeling, single family, low rise, multi-families up to 3 floors, mid rise of 4 to 8 floors. And I think I mentioned in the class yesterday, any residential building more than 9 floors would actually come under new construction. Okay. Uh, the last is the neighborhood development. For neighborhood development, again, it could include smaller infill projects, it could use larger mixed use areas or neighborhoods by itself. And we saw yesterday why it is separately, evaluated, because it does not entail just one particular building, but a bunch of buildings, a neighborhood or a network and a few buildings together, etc. Again, so healthcare, they look at inpatient facilities, they look at outpatient facilities, the long-term care facilities, offices. Over here, the sensitivity to chemicals and pollutants, I think that is where the difference comes in, from a regular new construction building. Right. So how do we select the rating system? We follow the 40-60 rule. 60% of the project building a space should be, applicable, or that particular system has to be particular domain or particular reference that you're choosing, BD+C or ID+C, should be actually, appropriate for at least 60% of the floor area. And again, multiple certification is possible. So a core and shell could be clubbed with an ID and C, as I already mentioned. A BD and C can be clubbed with an ONM, and there can be more combinations if it makes sense. The next is the LEED rating system structure. So as I mentioned, we need 3 terms that we have to be careful of. The first is the minimum program requirement, which is the basic eligibility you need to apply for a LEED certification, right? We saw a list of requirements. I'll be going through them in the next few slides. The prerequisites and the credits are actually domain specific. So under each domain, under the 7 domains that we were discussing, each of them have a set of prerequisites which you must meet and a set of credits that you can, earn as additional points. Yes. So the condition to achieve certification is to meet the MPRs and the prerequisite and earn minimum credits for certification. We already saw the different categories in the other presentation that we saw yesterday. We saw the different categories for LEED certification, right? So the most basic LEED certified category is from 40 to 49 points. So you need minimum 40 credits to actually be certified, as a LEED building. And further, the more number of credits you actually collect, you start upgrading to the next layers. So I would again suggest, or I will again remind that you keep in mind the ranges, the 4 categories. It's usually a repeated question in most of the LEED GA papers. Right. So what is the MPR? Again, it's for using, providing guidance and maintaining the integrity, and it reduces the challenge. Okay. So MPR, it has to comply with the environmental laws. It must be a permanent building or a space. It must use reasonable site boundary. It must comply with the minimum floor area requirements. Must comply with the minimum occupancy rates. It must commit to share whole building energy and water usage data, and must comply with minimum building area to site area ratio. Right. So we've already talked about this. This is just a brief run through again. So must comply with environmental laws. We are ensuring that whichever buildings, existing buildings, they have to comply with the environmental laws of the government. They have to look at the upgrades. They have to look at, certain CFCs and certain particular refrigerants have actually been phased out, have been or in the phasing out, process right now. So they have to keep in mind all of that. The new construction should, you know, one second. Yes, sorry for that. Yes, so the new construction, either core or shell, the schools, commercial interiors, etc., they have to comply with, all the basic environmental laws. They have to look at the number of emissions. There are certain, states that have separate environmental laws that new construction should keep into mind, right? So we have to ensure that happens. Zoning, we talked about it yesterday. So usually there's a land use plan that's prepared for every city or every state. And each of these new construction or existing buildings, they have to be in the appropriate zones. You cannot really have a residential area in a hazardous zone, or you cannot have a hazardous industry being, built right in the middle of a residential or a commercial zone. So you have to keep in mind such environmental laws. Um, it must be a permanent building of a space. It cannot be a mobile or it cannot be, a dismantleable space, caravans, tents, etc. So these are not really considered for a LEED certification. It has to be a permanent location on existing land. Again, when you're looking at existing buildings, when you're applying for an operation and maintenance certification, it has to include at least one existing building in the complete project. It cannot have complete new constructions. The third is must use a reasonable side boundary. I think I explained this in detail yesterday. So let's say the red is the lead boundary and this complete rectangle square. The dotted line is the lead boundary and this red rectangle is the side boundary. This would be, this would be all right and it would go ahead for certification. Whereas if it was the other way around, if the rectangle was the lead boundary that you're choosing and if the dotted boundary is your side boundary, that would not be applicable. The lead boundary always has to be smaller than the side boundary, lesser than or equal to. It can be the same as the side boundary also. Uh, there's a process of gerrymandering that occurs where people increase or decrease. They basically manipulate the land area so that they can earn more credits or points, which should not be done. And it has to be contiguous land. It has to be land. Okay, it cannot be that you pick up a building over here, you leave out a pocket in between, and you choose another land pocket over here. Either you register them as separate buildings or you take the entire build form into consideration. So people usually leave out pockets in between because the percentage would change, right? So such kind of malpractice, such kind of methods would not be encouraged. It must comply with the minimum floor area requirements. Uh, for existing buildings and for new construction, it must at least have 1,000 square feet area or 2% of the site area, whichever is higher. For a commercial interior spaces, we know they're very small in size, so it must be at least 50 square feet of the gross floor area. It must comply with the minimum occupancy rates. So we've already discussed this. So for new construction, core shell, schools, commercial interior, everything, it should serve at least one or more full-time equivalents. So we discussed this yesterday that office spaces, commercial areas, institutions, the FTE for such areas is usually considered to be 8 hours, which is the minimum working hours in a day that we consider. Whereas for homes, it's considered to be 24 hours. For operation and maintenance, it has to be operating at a 60% capacity and it has to be in operation at least for a minimum of 12-month period or a year prior to the application submission. So you cannot really, dig up an old building or you cannot really submit a very desolated, isolated building for operation and maintenance when it's not in the functioning condition. Right. So the anatomy of the system, under each credit category, we have prerequisites where they explain what it is or the intent of that particular, particular prerequisite, and then they list out what the requirements for that is. And then we have the credits, which are additional points that you get. The same, you have the intent or what is that particular credit explanation, and then you have the requirements for additional credits. This is the total number of points. So for the LEED rating system, you have 100 base credits, 6 for innovation, and 4 for regional priority credits. We'll be looking at innovation and regional priority in detail towards the end of our session. Not today, but the end of the program. But this is the 100 plus 10. And we already looked at the level of certification. So 40 to 49 is certified, 50 to 59 is silver, 60 to 79 is gold, 80 plus is platinum. And this is out of the 110. Okay. And whereas for LEED homes, it's 125 base credits and 11 for innovation. The next is the green building categories, which deals with location and transportation, sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, material resources, indoor environment quality, and these two club together, innovation and design and regional priority. Right? So additional categories for homes include location and linkages, awareness and education. For neighborhood development, it also includes smart location and linkage, neighborhood pattern and design, green infrastructure and design. The lead charrette is a workshop where we discussed about the IPD and the integrated project delivery method yesterday, where a project team is selected, where you have a project manager and a lot of people working together to put together this project, right? So a particular workshop will be done in the pre-design phase usually, where people sit together, they brainstorm, they discuss, they strategize the development, they list down the goals, they look at the planning for the project. And it usually includes owner, architect, engineers, contractor, consultants. And I also mentioned that a public opinion surveys, public opinion discussions are conducted certain that. So even they are included as a stakeholder. But the outcome of this particular charrette would actually include a lead scorecard draft, right? So the lead scorecard draft, I mentioned that it can be downloaded from the USGBC website, where it is just an Excel where it includes a yes, no, or a maybe column, and they just have to continue ticking, and the total would be calculated, and then preliminary rating is kept in mind, right? So you would know what you're aiming at. You know what is the target that is you set for yourself. This is the lead scorecard. As I mentioned, it's downloadable. It has a yes, maybe, or no column, and a preliminary rating or the target lead certification is known. Okay, so this is where until like this is the point up until which we covered yesterday. If there are any doubts until here, please let me know. Okay, we can take it up at the end of this also. There are a few more concepts that we need to look at when you're looking at the lead process. So I'll just continue. You can type it in the chat box, so you can ask at the end of this particular presentation. Okay, so next we're going to be looking at lead project registration, the application, and the certification process. Right? So the LEED certification is usually done through the GBCI website. As I mentioned yesterday, USGBC sets the standard, but GBCI is the certification organization or the institution. It's a third-party certification system, and they are the ones that maintain the credentials that certify the people